Next, we continue our look at the Chinese in America with a visit to San Francisco's Chinatown. This is the second of a three-part series.
People taking the train, coming west, they're encouraged to go west. As a matter of fact, people say, if you wish to succeed, go west, young man, go west. They arrive in the west, California and the territories, and discover something. All of the entrance-level jobs are taken by ethnic Chinese. Imagine that all the Mexican immigrant workers we have today in California are Chinese, and then you'll get a clearer picture. They're the ones who are doing all the labor in the street, doing all the landscaping, etc. As the groups show up, tensions and anger becomes more and more intense. Labor leaders begin to explain that the problem is that the Chinese are always willing to work no matter what the situation, therefore making it impossible to have strikes. The Chinese are being used as strike breakers constantly. There's a two-pronged attack that starts to happen. There is organized labor and informal attacks. The informal attacks are based on the fact that most people consider the Chinese to be the ones who are least likely to assimilate. And unbelievable stories are told about them due to sheer ignorance. Amongst them, that for instance, the Chinese eat vermin constantly. Here's a classic example. This is a box of rat poison, and on it, its name is Rough on Rats, we see there's a little Chinese man eating a rodent. And it promises that if you use this rat poison, it will be as efficient as a Chinese in getting rid of the rodents on your property. Between 1870 and 1900, these things happened repeatedly throughout the Western territories in California. Here, for instance, is the anti-Chinese riot of Denver, Colorado in 1870, when 3,000 citizens attempted to burn the Chinatown to the ground. They caught one unfortunate man and lynched him in the street. In Los Angeles in the 1870s, 18 Chinese people were lynched in the streets, 3 of them women. Extreme, but not isolated, was the Rock Springs, Wyoming Massacre of 1885, when every Chinese in town was taken to the edge of town and shot. In the middle of all of this, the Chinese Exclusion Act is put into effect. The Chinese Exclusion Act said essentially no more Chinese are allowed to enter the United States, period. This meant that Chinese who were home in China visiting family and who attempted to return could not re-enter. It did mean that those who were here could qualify as residents, but they could not bring their families here. They could bring their sons here if the son was registered as the son of a resident, but they could not bring their families here, no women. The only people who were allowed to bring Chinese women were a special exempt group known as those persons necessary for international trade. This meant ambassadors, teachers and students, and merchants, which is why, to this day, when Chinese American families enter here, we talk, and they say, oh, we've been here for 5 generations, we've been here for 6 generations. We know they were founded by a merchant because there's no other way they could have stayed as a family. As the laws began to stack up very quickly, it produced this effect. Number one, the Chinese became ineligible aliens by virtue of their race. Because they were members of the Mongolian race, they could never, ever become American citizens. And then it was only a short step to ensure that ineligible aliens were not allowed to buy land. Ineligible aliens were not allowed to join most professions by law. Ineligible aliens were not allowed to marry American citizens. Oh, I should clarify. A Chinese resident who was an ineligible alien could marry an American woman who was a citizen, but she would automatically lose her American citizenship and become a person without papers. If an American citizen married a Chinese woman who was a resident, she could stay because of something most of us have forgotten. Up until relatively recently, the law considered the wife the property of the husband. I know most of us have gone way beyond that now. This was the situation. Chinatowns existed. They shrank because there was no real immigration to speak of. They shrank increasingly because there were no women here, basically. Chinatowns became known as the bachelor society because people visiting would assume that all these men were bachelors. There were no women apparent. But of course, in fact, most of them were married. They had left overseas to go to other countries to support their families back in China.
This is the second of a three-part series on the Chinese in America with historian and storyteller Charlie Chin. You can view this and other American artifacts at our website, cspan.org/history.